We provide oversight based on what the law says. And I'd like to say this. This is not about any of our individual jobs. We acknowledge that the president has the right to remove any of us that he chooses. But the protections that were baked in to the act is everything. Absent having to provide a real reason, we're looking at what amounts to a threat to democracy, a threat to independent oversight, and
I mean, you worked at DOJ as of a couple of days ago. What is this going to do to the department? And how are your former colleagues who are still in the building doing right now?
Thanks, Jen. I think it's important to note from the forefront that the prosecutors, the career prosecutors who were fired today are some of the most intelligent, passionate, and well thought of attorneys in the country. It's a huge loss to the American people that they were let go. I think that the message that this sends to the country is twofold. First, it shows that politics above all. That's what this Department of Justice is about. It's not about the rule of law. It's not about prosecutors adhering to their duties to prosecute based on the facts, the evidence, or law. The message it's sending is adhere to the president and the will of the president, or you'll be fired. And second, it shows a lack of independence of the department.
In a move that's already facing legal challenges and a move that could limit independent oversight of his administration, President Trump has fired at least 15 inspectors general Friday night, claiming the decision was, quote, a very common thing to do. So let's back up for a second. Congress created the Inspector General role back in 1978. The vote was 388-6, according to Senator Grassley, who was in the Congress at that time. And the goal back then was to create independent and objective oversight that would audit government agencies, reducing waste, preventing fraud, and keeping lawmakers informed if there was need for, quote, corrective action. Then in 2008, Congress passed new legislation requiring the president to provide at least 30 days notice for any IG's removal. And then in 2022, additional new legislation demanded that the notice come with a, quote, substantive rationale, including detailed and case-specific reasons. Subjective, but there it is in paper. President Trump appeared to have ignored those rules, those two recent changes in the legislation, and that leaves a vacuum now, a vacancy in more than a dozen of these watchdog positions. So it raises the question, what do these IGs do exactly? Have they been successful since '78? Well, yeah, they have in many ways. They've uncovered and prosecuted all kinds of fraud, from cases in Medicare to disaster relief to government contracting. And in 2023, Inspector General investigations brought in, and this is 2023 alone, nearly $11 billion.
Yesterday, in the dark of night, President Trump fired at least 12 independent inspector generals at important federal agencies across the administration. This is a chilling purge, and it's a preview of the lawless approach Donald Trump and his administration are taking far too often.
The president cashiered a bunch of the inspectors general who the Senate relies on for providing information to give oversight. There's some uncertainty about what's going on here. Are you comfortable with the move?
So absolutely. You know, I think, first of all, remind everybody President Reagan did basically the same thing. Look, these inspector generals have lost their way. And this is part of President Trump's promises made, promises kept. He said he was going to drain the swamp. Over the past several years, record amounts of improper payments from the federal government, $250 billion of improper payments. The inspector generals have turned from a watchdog into somebody who's protecting the agency. So he's cleaning house, he's starting over.
Does everyone know what an inspector general is? No? All right. Well, let me break it down for you. We had an act that passed in 1978, and it sets out the parameters of our inspector generals, which are supposed to be people within the federal executive branch and the different divisions and agencies, keeping an eye on what's going on. So on how the people within the department are working, and if they're seeing any trouble or ways to be more efficient, and those kinds of things. The appointment process and removal process for inspector generals is set out in 5 United States Code Section 403. And I'll just read you Section A in general to kind of explain what's going on here. there shall be at the head of each office an inspector general who shall be appointed by the president by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, without regard to political affiliation and solely on the basis of integrity and demonstrated ability in accounting, auditing, financial analysis, law, management analysis, public administration, or investigations. Each inspector general shall report to and be under the general supervision of the head of the establishment involved, or, to the extent such authority is delegated, the officer next in rank below such head, but shall not report to or be subject to supervision by any other officer of the establishment. Neither the head of the establishment nor the officer next in rank below the head shall prevent or prohibit the inspector general from initiating, carrying out, or completing any audit or investigation, or from issuing any subpoena during the course of any audit or investigation. So they're kind of the equivalent to internal affairs. And if you were looking at this as an old cop show, so you've got the cops out there, right? And then you've got people like, ooh, internal affairs is after you. And the cops are like, oh, okay, what do we do? Now, here's the piece that I think perhaps someone has forgotten about, which is the Section B, removal or transfer of inspector generals. Let me just read this to you. An inspector general may be removed from office by the president if an inspector general is removed from office or is transferred to another position or location within an establishment. The president shall communicate in writing the reasons for any such removal or transfer to both houses of Congress, not later than 30 days before the removal or transfer. Nothing in this subsection shall prohibit a personnel action otherwise authorized by law other than transfer or removal. So you can do anything that you want except a removal, because in order to do that, you need to list out the reasons why you're trying to remove that and submit it to Congress with this 30-day piece involved. Inspector generals are not at-will employees, so you can't just get rid of them like you would if you were running a business. Meaning, technically, these inspector generals that are being discussed, I think there's about 12 of them that have been removed, would have grounds for lawsuits. Now, this isn't legal advice, this is legal education. But each and every single one of those inspector generals were not given 30 days notice, and nothing was given to Congress. They were just kind of like, oh, it's midnight, now you can go. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen, because the law was not followed in terminating their employment. And there's going to be, in my opinion, some significant legal issues if someone in the executive branch is like, well, we don't need to follow the rules, we'll just fire everybody. That's why the lawsuits are rolling in and will continue to be rolling in, everybody. Overall, we've got approximately 73 inspector generals throughout the federal system here in charge of different agencies' abilities to save money, financial responsibility, to cut waste, or to make sure they're investigating any kind of activities of their own employees. So kind of a whistleblower situation as well. We'll see what happens. Along with a lot of things that have been happening lately with the executive branch. And there are a lot of things going on in the executive branch that are against the rules and the laws. And the question is, who's going to enforce it? And my answer is, well, take them to court. That's what you got to do. Because at the end of the day, it's our judicial branch that has to make sure we're keeping the executive branch in check. Congress also has a role to play, but they're a little busy right now. So come on, checks and balances, do your job.
If you are a fan of democracy and you would like to see it intact, this is a video you need to watch. Now, this handsome devil here is Mark Greenblatt, and he is an Inspector General at the Department of Justice. And over the weekend, Donald Trump and his team attempted to fire Mark and several other Inspectors General and gave them barely any notice, which is illegal, by the way. And this is very, very concerning, and let me tell you why. Now, if you're wondering what the role of the Inspector General is, according to Google, the Office of the Inspector General in the U.S. Department of Justice is a statutorily created independent entity whose mission is to detect and deter waste, fraud, abuse, end misconduct in the Department of Justice, and to promote economy and efficiency in the department's operations. So in other words, they're there to make sure that there's no funny business, everyone's on the straight and narrow. They will investigate misconduct or abuse of the system if anything happens that's illegal within the Department of Justice. So it is a very important role. And a key part of that is that they are an independent actor. So they are nonpartisan, which means they are not a Democrat and they are not a Republican. They are not there to serve some political agenda. They are there just to do their job, which is to make sure everything within the Department of Justice, like I said, make sure that it's on the straight and narrow, there's no misconduct, all of that sort of thing. Now, this move is facing some legal challenges because you do have to provide notice and also a legitimate reason for all these firings. You can't just unilaterally decide to fire them without any notice. So who knows if it will happen. But if they are fired and then Trump is able to replace them with his lapdogs, that means that there will be people within the Department of Justice who would normally be there to make sure that there's no abuse or misconduct. They wouldn't even follow by those rules, and they will allow Trump to continue to do anything he wants to without any repercussions. They will not hold him to account for any of his actions that he'll do. So this is very concerning. And if you are a fan of democracy and you think that there should be checks and balances within the Department of Justice, then you should be very concerned about this. And not just in the US, but everywhere in the world.
With regard to the inspectors general, the president will, my understanding is he will be replacing those positions with new persons. And sometimes you need a fresh look. Look, we want to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse in every way possible. The president's committed to that, and we are as well. The inspector generals, when they are working on all cylinders and to their top level of effectiveness, they can be a huge part of that. I think the president appreciates that, but sometimes you have to have, begin a new page and start with a fresh start, and I think
So last night around midnight, Donald Trump fired 17 inspectors general from various positions around the federal government, which is a pretty bad sign for democracy. With that being said, during the Biden administration, the State Department Inspector General found that a private American security contractor in Africa was spending around $4 million per year in unauthorized executive compensation. And Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, responded with basically a shrug, even though 4 separate departments had reviewed that decision. Because he said no, the Inspector General could not enforce the decision. And that exemplifies to me the central problem with Inspectors General in the first place, which is that they operate basically at the pleasure of the cabinet secretary that they serve. And I know it might sound like I'm being hyperbolic, but there really aren't that many guardrails. Like, if the cabinet secretary decides that a decision is not enforceable, then that decision's not enforceable, and you're basically shut out of luck. The Inspector General publishes the report and then goes back to their day job. So while this is a bad sign for democracy because inspectors general do generally hold government agencies to account, it's not the worst sign in the world because it gives us a chance to make something better in the place of inspectors general when we go forward. Because defending institutions is important, but inspectors general were quite toothless before this decision, so I think that giving them more public spotlight allows us on the left a chance to fight back and allows us a chance to empower inspectors general and other people who want to hold federal actors accountable. Or at least that's my attempt to feel optimistic about an objectively dark situation.
Wow, like I was saying, America is getting crazier and crazier and crazier each day because Trump just fired 12 inspector generals without a 30-day notice. And yeah, wow, like you just wake up in the morning and you find you're dismissed. Like, these inspector generals were in charge of investigating waste and political waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. Like, this is just so crazy because he wants to appoint new ones, and it's raising a concerns to citizens if he's doing this. And is it possible that maybe the next ones are going to be corrupt? Like, I don't know, but someone else has done this before, so it's not something new. But this is within the first week, he's doing like too much instead of focusing on like reducing prices for groceries and like what can help us. But I think also it can help us because they are getting a lot of money for mostly for nothing. Like, some have spent like $4 million overseas over unofficial matters. So like, this is our tax money and it's being misused. So what I think is that maybe reducing the numbers of them is going to be something, and maybe that money can fill up somewhere else. But also it's sad because these people just woke up and lost their jobs. Like, yeah, it's crazy, but I hope it's for the best. But with Trump, I don't know. With Trump, we don't know if anything is for the best, actually. We just have to put hopes high. Because according to Trump, somewhat ineffective. He just thought that they were just filling these positions and doing nothing, I think. And people are like Senator Chuck Grassley is like, he's like, you need to give us more explanations so that we can understand, because like, you just can't come in here with the first week you're already doing like, is that too much? But the opposite also of what he's promised, like, you know, reducing prices for products and so on and so on. So, yeah.